I feel as euphoric today as I did when Reagan took office in the 1980s. I am expecting very much the same type of world to occur here. You're going to have fun. It is so much fun being in a bull market. I just got to tell you, just sit back, have your nice old fashioned with Maker's Mark bourbon, and you sit back and enjoy the living hell out of this period. I am thinking markets are going to be very, very good for the next 6, 8, 10 years.
Welcome to Thoughtful Money. I'm its founder and your host, Adam Taggart. Well, America has a new president-elect with a very different economic plan than the departing administrations. What new policies should we expect when Donald Trump returns to the White House? And what ramifications should we expect for the U.S. economy and the financial markets? Well, I can think of few better people to hear from on this topic than today's guest, who's one of the key economic advisors to President-elect Trump. Today, we're fortunate to welcome back to the program economist Dr. Arthur Laffer. He was the first to hold the title of Chief Economist at the Office of Management and Budget in the early 1970s. He then served as a member of President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board. He's perhaps best known for developing the Laffer curve, a model for determining the optimal balance between tax revenues and economic growth. Dr. Laffer, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, look, I can think of few people, as I said, to have this discussion with about what to expect from the incoming president-elect's economic plan. Let me start by saying, well, first off, real quick, what has been your level of involvement in the development of the Trump economic agenda so far?
I have no idea what my involvement is in developing the agenda, but I have been in conversations with him and a lot of people around him throughout the whole period of the last 4 years, and exceptionally intensively in the last 6 months. So I am involved with those people, and I don't know whether he listens or not, what impacts they've had or not, but I'm very pleased with what's happened, and I'm very pleased with what he's proposing. I'm going to tell you that I was very depressed in the late 1970s, 78, 79, 80, and just on the ground sobbing and weeping. And then all of a sudden, bang, we had Ronald Reagan, and the world took, and I've never had a bigger shift in my life than from the late 70s to the 80s under Reagan. I was euphoric under Reagan. I have the same set of feelings here. I've been exceptionally depressed under the last 2 or 3 years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then all of a sudden, the election results, I was down at Mar-a-Lago that night. I was at the Mar-a-Lago when the votes were counted. It was wonderful. And I can't tell you how happy I am with where we are today. I feel as euphoric today as I did when Reagan took office in the 1980s. I'm just over the moon, and I think this is going to be one of the best periods in U.S. history ever.
Okay, great. Well, look,
Is that good enough for you?
That's a great way to kick this off. And, you know, on this channel, I sometimes have been painted with the brush of being too bearish. Get some more bulls on there. It's great to have somebody coming on who's got a lot of optimism where things are headed here. I should note too, Dr. Laffer, that you have been an advisor to presidents for decades on both sides of the aisle. So yes. I don't think you consider yourself necessarily dyed in the wool on one side or the other. You're just trying to help America achieve better economic prosperity. I also remember from our previous discussions, you talked about the rapidity of the transformation of the economy during the Reagan administration, and have said, and I want to weave this into today's discussion, that, hey, if we adopt the right policies, you feel that we can have a transformation that could be as swift again. Is that true?
Very, very true. That's totally true. In fact, maybe even swifter.
Okay, maybe even swifter. Okay, so let's roll up our sleeves and get into the heart of it here. And I've got some questions that I think most of the audience probably shares, and I can't wait to walk through them with you. But let's start with, what is your current assessment of the new Trump administration's economic plan as best we know it? I was going to ask if you were optimistic. You've already answered that question for me. You did recently state that, quote, Trump could boost the economy far more than President Reagan. So what is it about the plan specifically that's got you so excited?
Well, as far as first-term presidents go, I believe that Donald Trump was the single best first-term president in U.S. history on economics. Now, remember, I'm only talking about economics.
Hmm.
I mean, the Supreme Court decision, the Chevron decision to not allow government agencies to make law, I think that's wonderful. I think Operation Warp Speed was unbelievably cool. I thought the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was amazing. I thought his energy policy was great. I could go on and on and on, but I thought he was the best single first-term president in U.S. history. Coming into the situation now, I look at what he's proposing and what he's talking about, and I'll go through the areas with you. And again, remember, this is just, Adam, it's just economics, and that's all I talk about. The first area is taxation. The North Star is a low rate, broad-based flat tax. That's the ideal tax system. Biden moved us away from that. He was trying to raise tax rates on the rich, trying to give welfare to the poor, and all of that stuff, which is just anti-growth all the way. Trump has proposed all sorts of ways of moving us towards the flat tax. In fact, there was even one conversation he had where he talked about eliminating the income tax.
Right.
I think that's a huge plus. Number two, government spending. All you have to do is look at Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to understand that he really is focusing on government spending. Now, during the first term, he did all that spending after COVID-19, which probably should not have been done, but he did it. This time, I think he's going to undo it, and I think you're going to see, while Biden was the biggest spender and wasteful spender of all time, I think Donald Trump is going to really hone in on government spending above and beyond what's necessary and bringing down that spending dramatically. And government spending, as you know, is taxation. I mean, government spending is you have to take from someone to give to someone else. And that's the transfer theorem, which we went through last time together. And the transfer theorem is government spending hurts the economy. And I think Trump's going to be spectacular on that. The one area where we maybe want to come back to is monetary policy. I think Powell is doing a very bad job on monetary policy, the anti-Volcker, if you will. I think that is an area that needs a lot of focus. And I'm not sure whether this administration is going to give it the right focus or not. I'm hopeful it will, but I'm going to pass that by. On regulations, I think this administration, the North Star is light regulations, minimal regulations, and Biden was very heavy-handed, very heavy regulations, closing the XL pipeline, all of that nonsense, which makes no sense whatsoever. I think Donald Trump is probably the best president ever on regulations. I'm very excited about that. And lastly, free trade. And this is the elephant in the living room. And I'm going to tell you, and I think I said this with you the last time we were together, Adam, is that Donald Trump uses trade as a negotiation tool to bring people to the table to negotiate free trade deals. He does not believe in high tariffs and high quotas and high non-tariff barriers unless the other side is absolutely unwilling to use reciprocity. And then he's willing to threaten them with access to the U.S. markets to bring them to the negotiation table to reduce tariffs, quotas, and trade barriers. You saw that with the USMCA. You saw it with the Japan-U.S. trade deal. You saw it with the U.S.-South Korea deal. You saw it with the Brazil deal. You saw it with Ecuador. You've seen it all over the place that he is a free trader, but he wants those countries to reduce their barriers against us just as much as he wants to not increase barriers against them. And he is willing to threaten them and bring them to the negotiation table. Classic is John Deere. John Deere is going to move to Mexico, produce all their goods down there, and then ship them in here. No, you're not. Come to me. Let's talk about what we can do to keep you here in the U.S. to make it worthwhile. That's the type of guy Donald Trump is. So I am very hopeful that he will be a very major promoter of free trade in the world like he was in his first term. There I go. There you go. You got
okay.
all those.
And I was going to ask you about tariffs because I remember from our previous conversations, you are not a fan of them. But what I hear you saying here is, and Trump himself says this, is really the tariff is the big stick. It's the thing that he is saying, look, exactly. I don't want to use it. I will, right? And it's hopefully the threat of the tariff is what leads to the negotiation of a mutually beneficial deal.
Yeah, I did a show called Vice in 2019 or something like 2018 that did it right after my conversation with the president back then, where he talked to me about how he is a free trader. And I went through that all then. So this is not a new story of mine. that I'm making up for political reasons. This is what he told me. It made perfect sense then, and then he followed through on it exactly as he said he would. And I'm very hopeful and believe that he will do it again and make this a much freer trade world.
Okay. I've got a follow-on question to that, as well as the rest of your list. Before I do, real quick, you've just listed a whole bunch of things you're very excited about, with maybe the question mark being monetary policy.
Yes, it is the question.
But is there anything that you know right now about the economic agenda, at least as stated, right, that you would change or that worries you at all?
Not really. I mean, when he did all the tax stuff, he did the tips. Why would you ever spend a lot of money collecting less money in taxes? Doesn't make sense. I think what he said about overtime work being lower tax rates or non-tax, I think that's just brilliant. I think what he said about deducting interest on auto loans is correct. If you're going to be taxed on interest income, you've got to also deduct interest expense. That's why homeowners' mortgage interest should be deductible.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, Americans working in foreign places should not be put at a huge disadvantage to foreigners. So therefore, the U.S. tax should not be added on to their taxes to make them the least efficient people in, let's say, Hong Kong or wherever they're working. I think all that makes perfect sense. And, he's just right in there. And he even mentioned that maybe we're going to try to get rid of the income tax. And, that would really rocket this ship to the moon. So I'm very pleased with their agenda.
So that's hard for me to get to my next question without stopping here on that part for a second.
Okay.
So
Sure.
Two questions on these big tax ideas. One, what is the level of feasibility of president coming in being able to make these changes? Because I don't think it can be done by executive order. I'm sure he's got to bring everybody along with him. And I think a natural question folks would say is, okay, well, that takes away a lot of revenue from the government. What are the implications of that? Right. And I know that the free marketers would say, well, that's more money for more people to spend. They're keeping it. That's
not where I am. I'm in incentives, and a tax rate is an incentive. It's a wedge between what you get paid and what you get to keep. And that wedge drives or makes employers not want to hire you, and it makes you not want to work when you raise taxes. When you lower them, you make it more attractive for both employers and employees, and it has nothing to do with putting more money in your pockets or any of that junk. It's just the marginal rates of incentives there are really improved for both employers and employees. All right, that's where I come about on taxes. When I look at the situation here with regard to the U.S., these taxes, I did Jerry Brown's flat tax when he ran for president in 1992. I think he was one of the greatest candidates of all time. What he wanted to do was get rid of all federal taxation and in their stead have two flat rate taxes, one on business net sales, which is a value-added tax, and one on personal unadjusted gross incomes, on the first dollar to the last dollar. So there's no deductions, emissions to credits, any of that stuff. It's just flat tax on both of those. We could have replaced all federal taxation, all of it, with two flat taxes on business net sales and personal unadjusted gross income. We could have done it with a tax of 11.8% or 12%. I rounded it up to, Jerry rounded it up to 13%. Mm-hmm. That is the direction you want to go. You want to look at what Reagan did in the 86 Tax Act. We took 11 tax brackets and turned it into two. We lowered the top rate from 70% to 28%. We raised the lowest rate from 12.5% to 15%. We went from 11 brackets to two, and we eliminated all the deductions, exemptions, and exclusions in there, equaling so it was revenue neutral. I mean, this thing, we cut the corporate rate from 46% to 34% under Reagan. That is the dream. That's where we should go. That's what Jerry Brown did. If Donald Trump moves in that direction, I would just scream and holler. I'd stand on my head and spit wooden nickels. You would see the greatest economy for 1,000 years. It would be the greatest period of U.S. history ever.
Okay, so to make that happen, what needs to happen? Is that something that requires
legislation?
Okay, so Congress has to come along on this one.
Yeah, and plus, we've got 53 senators, and there are a lot of Democrats who would love to vote with us. Let me just tell you that. They know the Biden-Harris agenda was crap. They do know that. They went along with that for politics. But if you make the bill so you incorporate them in it and you get rid of the deductions, exemptions, and exclusions, so it's not a huge revenue loser static, I think you can bring a lot of Democrats like we did in the 86 Tax Act. If you'll remember, in the 86 Tax Act, the vote was in the Senate 97-3. All right, only 3 Democrats voted against our bill. We could do that again here. We also have control of the House, which is also very advantageous for this one. In fact, if you look at the government in its grandiosity there, of the 7 positions of political power, this administration has 6 of them. It has the presidency. It has the most exclusive club in the world, the Senate. It has the People's House, the House of Representatives. It's got the Supreme Court. And I don't mean on social issues. I mean on economics. I mean, they've got big time. It does not have the Fed, but it does have control of most governors, and it has the control of most legislatures as well. So of the 7 positions of political power, there are 6 that are in the Trump camp. And even the Republicans now are better Republicans than they were prior to Trump's coming into office the first time. I mean, we don't have the Romneys, we don't have the Jeff Flakes, we don't have some of these others who were really hostile to Trump. These guys want to play ball and get it done. So I think there's a very good chance that if he wanted to do something, given the role of the 7 positions of political power, he could actually do it.
And he would get the Fed in a year, right?
Yeah, he may not really. The Republicans on the Fed and the Democrats on the Fed are no better. The Fed is a very intricate thing that they don't understand. We need to get Volcker back. And there are very few people today who think like Volcker. We do not need the Fed setting interest rates. We need the Fed setting the balance sheet. That's what we need to do. Set the balance sheet and let interest rates be what they will be, but contract the balance sheet to bring down inflation over the long run, expand the balance sheet to increase inflation over the long run. That's the way we need to run it. And these guys don't know straight up from Sikkim. Powell asks his staff, "What should I do?" Volcker told his staff what he was going to do.
Did you? Well, that's my point, right? So Powell's tenure is up, I think, in March, or so of 2026, and that position is appointed by the president. I got to say, I've seen names like hawks like Kevin Warsh floated for the next Fed chair, but I got to say I've seen Art Laffer's name floated as well. So if an Art Laffer were put in there, could he command the Fed to what's needed to be done?
Yeah, to get rid of one silly question. That's one. I'm 84. I'm in my 85th year. No one's appointed to a job then. And number 2, I have never taken a job in government because I don't ever want to be compromised by being an employee and having the oath of loyalty there. I was in the White House from 1970 to 72 under George Shultz. That's true. And I found out what I don't do well. I do not work well in bureaucracies or governments. I keep my confidences with presidents. I worked closely with Reagan. I never was disloyal to Reagan, but I never shaved an answer with Reagan because I was trying to appease him or make political favors.
Right.
You look at these other people, Adam, and you see them, they will rebut arguments they know to be true in order to curry favors with their political benefactors. I never want to be in that position, and I never will be, and I never have been except for the 1970 to 72 period when I didn't know better. But looking at, let's say, Janet Yellen or some of these others, they know better than what they're saying. But they're doing it to be a team player. I don't like being a team player. Not that I'm going to betray my team, my team by privacy and what goes on, but I don't want to ever hedge my bets and not say what I believe to be correct because I'm a team player. I'll just keep my mouth shut. And so there's no chance of me ever going into government, but thank you very much for the nice little rumor, but that's not going to happen.
Okay, well, and just to be clear, not my rumor. It's one I actually read this morning in preparation for this conversation. But to the spirit of the question, you said that currently the administration has 6 out of the 7 kind of keys to power.
They sure do.
It could get a 7th if it appointed an Art Laffer like head of the
I think
Fed.
Kevin
Right?
Walsh would be great. I think there are plenty of others that are really good out there, but it's a whole Fed board too that's not on
Yeah.
track.
You got to drag them along. You have to have a
Oh
whole,
my
yeah.
God, it's like pulling teeth to get people to understand how money works because they don't have a clue. You need to control the monetary base and create economic growth, and you'll bring down inflation, you'll bring down interest rates, and you'll create prosperity for 1,000 years. But, these people don't understand that.
Okay, well, we will be watching this obviously very closely over the next year to see
Me
who
too.
replaces Powell. But to your point about your excitement and your experience and your academic expertise around taxes, because that's your thing, right? I mean, at the core, you're Mr. Tax Policy guy.
Well, I started off in life as a trade economist. My dissertation's all on trade, my textbook's on pure trade theory and on balance of payment stuff. So all of my early years was on trade, which is the most rigorous area of economics.
Okay, but you love taxes. I mean, you think
I
taxes are
do,
the
I do,
key
but
lever, right?
yes, I do.
So here's my question. We have a border czar now, or we have a government efficiency czar. Should we have a tax czar? If they're really going to try to do this, should they have a guy who's just, this is his job, he's making sure it gets happened? It sounds like you would think, from what I hear from you, they should prioritize this early because who knows what's going to happen in the midterm elections. So while you've got all these keys lined up, like run with it. Should Trump consider appointing a tax reform czar?
I thought he had in Bassett. I mean, he's just great, and he's Secretary of the Treasury, which is
Mhm.
totally in control of taxes. It's
Okay, so that's the right appointment for the right department, you think?
I think it's the right appointment for the right department. Obviously, ex post facto, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I know him. He came out here 5 weeks ago, spent the full day with me. He's a fellow Yalie. He's a hedge fund guy. He knows markets well. I couldn't be happier with the Secretary of the Treasury than I am with Scott Bessent. I just couldn't be happier. He is the guy who needs to be focused on taxes.
Okay, so you anticipated some of my other questions. I was going to ask about what you thought about his nomination so far, especially Treasury. Sounds like you give a great big thumbs up. How
Yes, sir.
about Lutnick at Commerce?
I don't know Lutnick at all. Other people say he's really good. I don't know him. Obviously Trump's people think he's good because otherwise he wouldn't have been appointed. But I do know the firm that he worked for, Apollo. I knew that really well. Apollo's a great firm, and all I hear is good, but I do not know him, and I don't wish to make a statement about it. I think Commerce is an important department, but not nearly what Treasury is, not what State is, and not what Defense is.
Okay. I also was going to ask you about Fed chair, but we already went there, which is great.
Yeah.
I love it when my interviewees anticipate my questions. So, okay, here's the big question I've been trying to build up to. You are very optimistic about where this could go,
Yes, sir.
and giving you confidence in that optimism is what you went through during the Reagan administration. A
Yes.
lot of what is being proposed here is disruptive, right?
Yes.
So here's my question. So let's assume for a
Let me
moment that,
ask you a let me
yeah,
ask you a question before you do. Is
yeah,
stopping smoking disruptive?
no, and this is a great analogy for my question.
Thank you.
Okay. So just like with stopping smoking, right? The best thing to do is just to stop doing it,
Stop it.
right?
I
Yeah.
did it.
Okay, you did. But for most people who are heavily addicted to nicotine, there's a rough patch,
Yes,
right?
there
There's a
is.
withdrawal period you go for. And
Yes,
so
sir.
my question is let's give Trump the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he is successful. 4 years from now, he can claim victory on all these things, right?
Yes.
Is it going to require a period of short-term economic pain to get out to the other side, especially given what I would imagine you would say, the hole that we have currently dug for ourselves?
Yeah, there will be some people will be in pain. That's true. I don't think there's going to be aggregate economic pain. I don't think we need to go through a recession or a depression or any of that stuff. I think the reason that happened with Reagan was very different than today. And I think Trump will miss the mistake that Reagan made. In 1981, Reagan cut tax rates, as you know, by 25% across the board. All right. But he phased those tax cuts in. If you know they're going to cut tax rates next year, what do you do this year? You defer
Right.
all the income you can.
To next year, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, Reagan caused the 81, 82 recession, deep recession, because he phased in the tax cuts. The tax cuts began literally on January 1st, 1983. Bang, the economy took off. From January 1st, 1983 to June 30th, 1984, That's 18 months. That's a year and a half. That's 6 quarters. U.S. real GDP grew by 12%. 12%, Adam. I mean, 12%. You know, you had average annual growth rates of 8% for a year and a half, which is just unbelievable. I think Trump can get that type of thing through if he doesn't make some very simple mistakes, which I do not expect him to make. He knows what happens with incentives when you phase things in. If you've got fat bureaucrats that are not producing things, that are holding things back, and you terminate them and let them get good jobs out in the private market, I don't see how that's going to cause pain. Now, that guy's not going to like changing jobs, but the country's going to be a lot better off because he changed it. Can you imagine all those tax accountants actually doing something productive? How wonderful would that be? Now, would those tax accountants vote for this bill? No, of course they wouldn't. But they're wrong. And it's going to make America a lot better right away. They quit doing damage and they start doing good. How can that be bad for the country?
So and my premise here is I'm not saying it's good or bad. I can get on your bandwagon and say I think if a lot of this stuff gets done, it's going to be really good for economic growth, you know, sustainable long-term economic growth. The question I have is, if DOGE is successful at drastically reducing the size of government, and you know they're talking about, you know, mass deportations of bureaucrats, right? So lots of big job cuts. You know, those folks will hopefully get employed, although people will argue, are they actually employable in other parts of the economy? Who knows? We'll find out. But they're not going to get fired on day one and get rehired somewhere in day two. If he's successful in deporting, you know, millions of undocumented people that are currently working in the system, you know, many under the table, but in construction and other key parts of the economy, if we go through the tariff, I'm going to call them tariff wars, right? But presumably, you know, there will be certain deals, certain countries that don't roll over on day one and may require a short-term implementation of a tariff or just other saber rattling, right, economically. All that stuff, you're much better to assess this than myself, but I don't see that as all happening magically, you know, very quickly, where on the average.
You could well be right on that. I mean, you know, there's some of these things may have negative outcomes because it takes a while for this to happen and that to happen. But all the ones you've talked about so far, I would look at in a slightly different way. And I am no better at judging what's going to happen than you are. Please, I know my ignorance, and my ignorance is astoundingly large. And what you're postulating here does make a lot of sense. I agree with you. I look at it at the other side of the ledger. I say that if these guys, let's say, get a 6-month bonus from government, so they aren't going to be hard pressed for 6 months. They can go out and find a job, do a career. I think that's really positive. I think the people who are going to be deported are going to be the people who are hurting America most, are going to be the criminals, the scofflaws, the bad guys, the DO, all of these people, the Tren Alagua, or whatever the heck these groups are. So they're going to get the bad ones out first. And then I think you're going to see a very different attitude towards the good ones who are working hard, supporting their families. I don't know how that's going to finally end up, but I'm much more optimistic about the mass deportations, that the bad ones will be gone and some of the good ones may remain. I'm much more optimistic than you are with regard to the government workers. I'm also more optimistic than you are that these guys will stop doing harm and will start doing good things. Milton Friedman used to say that the best thing that you could do in America is destroy all the highways from the suburbs to downtown Washington, D.C. Just don't let them come into the office. Pay them, do anything you want. And the damage they do will be stopped and will be huge improvement. Right. He was joking, but there's an element of truth in what he said.
Sure. And we just saw this, I think, in Canada. I think they had a couple of weeks shutdown of the government there, and like literally nothing changed.
I know. Like, Canada is a perfect example of what not to do. Oh.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this question, because I don't know the answer to this too, but I have a hard time seeing the patient not go through withdrawal symptoms, at least, you know, in the near term. And so my question is, and also too, we haven't really talked about this, but if they're really reducing deficit spending, and there've been a lot of artificial liquidity pumped into the system, both on the monetary side, but especially on the fiscal side of late. That's been supporting the economy. It's also been supporting the financial markets. Again, I just have a hard time saying, can we turn off those spigots, you know, with vigor without seeing some real repercussions? And so I would think, if I were advising the Trump administration, I would say, maybe get out in front of this and communicate now to people almost sort of a wartime message, which is we're going to get to a much better place, but we inherited an economy that's got a lot of issues going on. We've got to do our radical surgery to help the patient, get better here. But we're going to have a period of sort of shared national sacrifice where things are just going to get bumpy, and we're going to need to shoulder this together to get the country to a better place.
See, let me ask you the question. You say bumpy, but the guy who's going to be on life support or no longer supported, the guy who's addicted to the nicotine is not the American people. You're not addicted to your taxes. If someone said you're going to have to pay half the taxes you paid before, are you going to go, oh my God, no, don't do it. Please help me. No, it's the government that's going to be weaned off nicotine, not the country. Now, the country, I think, is going to be benefited immediately. I think the government's going to find out it's got programs and stuff that it's going to have a hard time shutting down, and the bureaucrats are going to have a hard time finding these jobs, as you said. All of that's true. But the country as a whole will be thankful that their mom stopped smoking.
Okay.
I think you and I are going to be really happy that mom's going on withdrawal and she's not going to die of cancer next year.
Okay. And that's maybe the core of my point, which is, and again, I don't have the answer. I'm trying to see if you have a better view.
Me too. I don't have the answer either.
Yeah. But what matters is what the regular person feels, right? I mean, I think that's what determined the election was people walked in and they voted really their pocketbook. I'm not feeling better off than I was 4 years ago. I'm more worried about the future economically.
Let me ask you that question. Let me just ask you that question. Do you think people are really worried about the consequences of not paying as much in taxes?
Oh, not at all. But I guess my question to you is there a danger if we do have some rough, initial withdrawal effects from this?
Tell me the source of the roughness. That's what here are people who are on welfare right now or who are living on government programs. They are not going to get those government programs. Right. Now, that won't happen in 2 days. It'll happen 6 months, let's say, whatever the time period is, but they won't have them. Does that hurt America? I mean, I'm asking you that question. I don't see how getting someone off welfare and into a job hurts our country. I don't see how that does it. I don't see how stopping inflation causes America to be damaged, even in the short run. I really don't.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the latter one. The second one, obviously, the people who have become dependent upon those welfare programs will see the transition as not fun.
That's correct. But the people who are paying those bills won't. Those people, your taxes are going to go down dramatically. So,
okay, yeah, and if your taxes go down dramatically very early on, I think that's great. The question I was sort of asking is, could there be enough economic pain in the short term that when the midterms come up, people are dissatisfied and all of a sudden they lose the house, right? And it makes this stuff a lot harder.
I think it goes the other way. The longer you wait and the longer you phase in, the more guaranteed you're going to lose the house. That's why I use the Reagan example of the phasing in of the tax cuts.
Yeah, so you're just rip the Band-Aid off day one, just go.
You say to rip the Band-Aid off, you give the guy in the desert some water.
Okay, yeah.
That's not ripping the Band-Aid. See, the analogies you're using are all these pain analogies and all these curing of, and oh my God, your arm's going to hurt. Like, no, it's not. When you get off your camel and you haven't had water for 3 days and you see a glass of water, no, you're only going to have a drop first, and then 2 drops. Then no, drink the whole damn glass of water and be back to normal. And I think people are going to find it exceptionally good to have the burden of welfare payments and all of this stuff because we have economic growth. The best form of welfare is still a good, high-paying job. And to create this, I mean, when I said to you about what happened to GDP growth from January 1st, 83 to June 30th, 84, that 12% growth was the greatest elixir this country has ever had. There was no downside to that. It was spectacular. The poor got jobs, the unemployed, instead of getting welfare, they got paychecks. What could be better than that?
Okay.
And running a system on welfare for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years now. God, it's awful. Ever since COVID-19, it's time we got over it. We got over ourselves and provided them with good for the poor, the minorities, the disenfranchised. All of these groups are going to be better off, and that's why I think Trump did much better with these groups in the election than did Biden or Harris. I mean, the reason is that they understand that there is no path to their success except through hard work and growth and doing it on their own. And I think we all feel that way, and we all are just ecstatic about what's happening.
Okay. And all those outcomes, I've got to imagine most people watching here, are probably standing up in their chairs and applauding you, Dr.
I
Laffer.
don't mean to do that either. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So, and this is great because I think the list of concerns that I had, yeah, I share or have had, and
Yes,
I know viewers
I
have had
understand
because
what you said all the way.
and again, it's not a resistance to the end outcome. It's
I
just,
understand. I
hey, can
understand that
yeah.
too. A lot of
Okay.
people
So
feel just the way your questions were. Almost everyone I talk to feels the way your questions were. You just said it very articulately, and I was able to respond. But there's one other area that I think is really important here.
let's go there.
War.
Okay. Yep.
Or
And presumably ending wars, correct?
you better believe it. There's nothing that brings down the endorphins and all that than watching people get bloodily murdered over in Ukraine or in Gaza or in the Houthi rebels and all that. And peace through strength is the key. We need a very strong Defense Department, and we need an open free market economy to. Here's your deal. If you want to share with us in the creation of prosperity by trading with us and using us and all that, wonderful. You're welcome to our table. By the way, if you don't, and you're going to go the other way, we got the best Defense Department in the world. And Reagan did it. We had no wars under Reagan. We had no wars under Trump's first term. John F. Kennedy was the greatest president on this, that when he said, the best form of defense spending is always wasted. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where you are required to use your military hardware and prowess, that is a clear sign you did not spend enough. We should not be in Ukraine. We should have stopped it before it started. And Biden wasn't able to do that because he was weak. We had a problem in Gaza that I honestly believe the Gaza attack would not have occurred had Trump been the president, and did occur because of the weakness of Biden, Harris there. That's me. But you can see the first term under Trump, there was no war. Bang, he goes off. Bang, we have war immediately with Biden. And now they want to escalate it. What is the end game for these war hawks? What is the end game for the neocons? Okay, flex your muscles. What are you going to do? You want to really prod that bear? Is that what or you want to sit down with Putin and say, look, guy, none of us want to go this route all the way. I mean, we're nuking Moscow and you're nuking somewhere else. That's not, as Linda Ronstadt said, no one likes nuclear war. I think that the manifestations of prosperity and strong defense will be peace. And peace is the greatest elixir for happiness you've ever seen.
Okay. And so presumably, if Trump is able to come in, continue his record of not starting new wars, and achieve hopefully ends to the current big
got to get a Ukraine settled. You've got to get it settled.
But it sounds like you expect that aside for a moment, you expect a lot of domestic benefits from all the policies we've talked about. Then you add a peace dividend on top of that.
That's exactly it. It's a two-pronged attack. Huge prosperity, which makes everyone in the world better off, and peace, which makes everyone in the world better off. That double-pronged fork there is the key to world peace and happiness and prosperity, and I'm really excited about it as an 84-year-old.
Okay, well, that's great. It is great to see. So let me ask you this, and you're probably going to be postulating here. I don't pretend that you're necessarily an expert on this, but you definitely have more context than I do. In terms of what's been driving the bus to date, that's gotten us to the point we're at right now. Is it a worldview, do you think, that is driving the current U.S. geopolitical strategy, or is it more just the military-industrial complex in the driver's seat that is just lining so many pockets that everybody's going along with it?
I understand the latter, but I think it's the former that is correct here. There have been two views in the world here. The one view is Keynesian, or what I call redistributionist, and then there's the other view, which I call growthist or supply-side economics. And these two views have been battling politically from time immemorial. They really have. For example, to a Keynesian, people work because they're jobs. To us, the supply-siders, people don't work because they're jobs. They work to get paid after tax. To a Keynesian, people save because their incomes are high. To us, supply-sided, people save to augment their wealth and make an after-tax rate of return. To a Keynesian, if their government's running short of revenues, it's got to raise tax rates. to do that. To us, that's a double-edged sword. Sometimes when you raise rates, you do get more revenues, but sometimes you also get less. It's a different view. To us, the primary role of the state, of government, is to create a political economy of growth, to create prosperity, output, employment, production, to bring the people, the poor up. To the redistributionists, they believe the problem is equally as bad on the wealth. Their job is to take from those who have a little bit more and give to those who have a little bit less. Thereby, the more have a lot of it anyway, but the poor need the money. They view themselves as redistributing a given amount of income, and us, we view it as a very different world. And those are the two worldviews, and they've been at battle here and in every other country for 1,000 years. And this is our turn to shine. We are the growthists. We are the peaceful people. We are the people that really want to create a bigger pie rather than trying to redistribute a shrinking pie. And it's totally that. It's in academics all the way. I mean, I'm Yale undergraduate, Stanford PhD, all of that, and I know my colleagues well, and they are all redistributionists. All of them want to redistribute, take from production, make cleaner air. You know, my view on global warming is just tax carbon and you'll get people, that's it. And use the revenues to lower income taxes. You don't have to have depression, contraction, and slow to clean air. You can do it really easily with a carbon tax and use that carbon tax to cut income tax rates by an equal amount. And God bless you, you'll have a great economy and clean air in addition to a great economy. And these guys don't see it that way. And they're all my friends. I mean, I went to graduate school with all of them. I got better grades than they did. And, but they don't see the growth model. They just don't see Adam Smith. They don't see David Ricardo. They don't see growth economics. They see it as the dismal science, and they go home and the rich people are taking all the money we could give to the poor. No, the rich people are the people who hire the poor. The rich people are the ones who give the poor a chance to become rich. Tax codes are a guaranteed way of never letting a poor person ever become rich. Because the only way you can make it through a tax code is by having a lawyer, an accountant, a deferred income specialist, a paper grabber, or a lobbyist. It is the guaranteed way of making damn sure the club never allows a new member. I want to get a low-rate, broad-based flat tax so poor people can become rich and join the club. We need to crash this party and get prosperity. And you see the difference in the two views. And I have not been winning for a while, but now is my turn.
All right. So this has been fantastic, Dr. Laffer. I've got two questions for you as we begin to land the plane here. And I'm trying to think of the way to order them. I guess I'll start with this one. So you're very optimistic about where things are headed from here. Now is our time. Now's the time that you've been advocating for. It sounds like you think the economic benefits are going to be pretty immediate, right? You know, we may have some short-term transition, but you think you're going to.
Unless he makes a big mistake, they will be immediate.
Okay.
Stock market showing us that right now.
Okay, so should be immediate, and if it is, you think we'll see the benefits immediately. Yes. Okay, that's the economy. I don't know if you have an opinion based on where you sit of the markets. Markets have been they're quite richly valued, although if we turbocharge the economy, all of a sudden, you know, earnings can rev back up and maybe justify these large valuation multiples we have here. What are your general thoughts on the markets?
Let me go back in history a little bit with you. In February of 1966, at the end of the Kennedy era, from February 66 to August 13th, 1982. Wow, I mean, that's 16 and a half years.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market, the Dow, went from 1,000, its intraday high in February 66, to 777 in August 13th, 1982. That's a decline of about 22.5%, something like that.
Over 16 and a half years.
Over 60, that's a bear market. That's in 22 there. But that's not all. During that period from February 66 to August 13th, 1982, the price level trebled. Not only did the price level treble, but that meant that the real value of the stock market went from 1,000 in February 66 to 235 in August of 1982. That's a decline of 76.5% in real terms. That is a bear market. The market dropped at an average annual compound rate of 7% per annum. 7% per annum for 16 and a half years. Ouch! Then what happened? then God shone his face upon us, and the world went boom. I am expecting very much the same type of world to occur here. You're going to have fun. It is so much fun being in a bull market. I just got to tell you, just sit back, have your nice old fashioned with Maker's Mark bourbon, and you sit back and enjoy the living hell out of this period. I am thinking markets are going to be very, very good for the next 6, 8, 10 years. I mean, it's going to be a Reagan era. Just look at what happened to those markets. It just goes pew under Reagan, under Kennedy. Did you see what happened when Kennedy took off? When you got to what was it, July 1st, 1962, when he reaffirmed dollar convertibility, proposed the tax rate cuts. It was the go-go 60s, this sharp rise in the market. We're in for one of those periods as well. Now, I don't mean to overwhelm you with my optimism, but I've been depressed for a bunch of years now. It's my turn to be happy. And you're going to
Okay.
be happy right along with me. Believe me, you are.
All right. Well, look, from your lips to the universe's ears, I really want to drink this elixir. Part of my brain is rebelling on,
Wait, just see.
yeah. Well, here, let me just
Yeah.
quickly note this and let you, put a dagger in it if you want. But, we've had a prolonged bull run in the market. Yeah, it's been punctuated by the GFC and by COVID very briefly, but I mean, stocks have done phenomenally well, right? I mean, they were 666 in the bottom of 2009. We're now probably going to hit 6,666 before too long. The Buffett ratio, which is basically a PE for the whole market and economy, is the highest it's ever been. So it just makes me think, really, like we're at these very high level of valuation extremes. We can have another glorious 6 to 8 years on top of this, but it seems like you think so.
Well, the indices that you use are, and I know these, I was a University of Chicago professor there for years and years, 10 years, and that's the finance capital of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the number of companies being publicly traded has shrunk dramatically. Private equity is doing a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if all the private equity became publicly traded. What do you think would happen? I mean, what happened with the tax cuts under Reagan is that all of a sudden C Corps expanded dramatically in the number. If you look at any of the stuff that Austin Goolsbee has done and the number expanded, everyone went back to C Corps because the rates were dropped dramatically. I think you're going to see a lot of that happening. Now, it may not be as cool and as good as it was in the 80s or in the 60s, but I think it's going to be really cool. Now, if it's not a 10Xer, all right, I'll take a 2Xer, 3Xer in real terms. You got to look at it in real
terms. Yep.
And if you look at that in real terms, you need to have as many companies publicly traded available for the private market, for the old market. And that I think you're going to see too. If you get that corporate rate down to 15% or 10% or something like that, why wouldn't these companies, all these private equity ones, now go public and be out there and traded? And, I think there's a lot going on now. Don't make me tell you that it's going to be better than Kennedy or better than Reagan or even half a Reagan or half a Kennedy, but it's going to be a good time. And I think you're going to be really pleased. Now, you'll call me a liar 10 years, 8 years from now, because I'm only up 3X, not 10X.
I would never do that, Dr. Laffer.
You know what I'm saying, though. I am just very excited that it's not going to be a Biden World War III. I'm really, really was depressed coming into this. And I mean that. My grandchildren, I got 14 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, and I was looking at what's going on in Ukraine, when I'm looking at world history, and I'm seeing a really ugly, ugly future. It's now not ugly. It's now really much prettier than it has been for a long, long time in every regard. Well,
I think given the scope of your career and the kind of front row seat you've had through the administrations, I'll say for me personally, but I imagine I'm speaking for a lot of viewers here, it gives me a lot of comfort to know that somebody who's got the perspective that you do is suddenly feeling a lot more relieved about the country's future prospects.
Yeah, as I told the one, I said, okay, Lord, you can take me any day now. I'm all right. I'm leaving on a high note. I don't want to leave. I want to stay around for as long as possible. But I love it that I'm coming to the 85th year of my life on a very high note.
All right. Well, look, as long as you were around, Dr. Laffer, you were welcome on this program to come on this program anytime you like.
You're welcome to call me anytime. I love being with you.
Well,
It's
thank
really
you.
fun, by the way, and I love that white oak behind you. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Real quick, I realized I forgot to ask you about one important thing. I think you mentioned it briefly, but what is your expectations for inflation given this economic plan? Assume you think it's going to go down pretty
The
dramatically.
one I didn't answer that I didn't answer was the Fed. And I don't know what the answer there is. And inflation does depend upon whether, in fact, we get a cure at the Fed. Now, with extra economic growth, that means inflation probably will be dropping because of the more goods you have out
Yep.
there, the lower the prices are going to be, the lower inflation is going to be. But I don't really have a good picture of inflation unless the Fed is really corrected. And that will take a dramatic move in the next 2 years.
Okay, I'm going to let you go in just a second. The question I'm trying to get to is where can people follow you and your work? But before I ask you that one, I'm just curious, and if you don't have an opinion of this, say you have no opinion. I wouldn't normally ask you about Bitcoin, but part of the whole platform recently became we're going to have a Bitcoin strategic reserve for the nation. Do you have any thoughts at all, one way or the other, about that?
Yeah, Bitcoin and gold and all these things that have been rising are a clear sign that the markets are sick and tired of the dollar and other paper currencies that have been monopolized by the government since 1913. Before 1913, we had private banking. There was no government intervention at all. I mean, the government defined what a dollar was. It did have mints, but so did everyone else. Private sector was full of mints. The only effective role the government had prior to 1913 was auditing banks' balance sheets and assuring that they were correct. That was good, but all the money was banknotes and all that. And for 2.5 centuries prior to 1913, before the government started nationalizing, inflation averaged 0%. Since the government's been nationalizing money, starting in 1913, but then also the devaluation of the dollar in 33 under Roosevelt, then the Smithsonian, then the interest equalization tax, the voluntary foreign credit restraint, and now Powley-Wowley and his silly moves, all of that now, we have had an increase in the price level of 33-fold or 3,300% in a little bit over 100 years. It's time for us to get a private money back, or if it's good possible, have the government create a good money, but I'm really not hopeful. That's why I don't want to really comment to you solely on Powell. But I love the fact that Bitcoin is moving in. I love the fact that gold is up. By the way, I do not own Bitcoin, nor do I own gold. I just don't. But let me just say that I'm really proud of the private market trying to stop this government monopoly of bad money.
All right. Well, look, Dr. Laffer, the next time you come on, I'll be more fair to you, and I'll give you more time to talk about where you would like to see money going forward. But it's been a fantastic conversation. For folks that would like to follow you and your work in between now and the next time you come on this channel, where should they go?
I guess a website at the Laffer Center. I don't know what's the Laffer
LafferCenter.org.
LafferCenter.org is where they can do, but don't expect anything from me. I have a flip phone. All right. I don't do emails. I have an email for someone in the office here is my email. You know, I still write all of my books cursive. Ich bin nicht von gestern. Ich bin von vorgestern. I'm not from yesterday. I'm from day before yesterday. So, but I love it, love it, love it. And I love seeing this world evolve. And I just can't tell you how joyous it makes me feel.
All right, well, folks, if you'd like to see Dr. Laffer come back on this program sooner rather than later, please let him know that by hitting the like button and then clicking on the red subscribe button below, as well as that little bell icon right next to it. If you would like some help in preparing for the future ahead, possibly a very good future for the markets, as Dr. Laffer thinks we might be getting set up here for, I recommend that most folks do that by working with a good professional financial advisor who understands all the macro issues that Dr. Laffer and I talked about here. If you've got a good one who can do that for you, great, stick with them. But if you don't, or you'd even just like a second opinion from one who does, then consider scheduling a free consultation with one of the financial advisors endorsed by Thoughtful Money. To do that, just go fill out the short form at thoughtfulmoney.com. Only takes you a couple seconds to fill out the form. These consultations are totally free, and there's no commitment to work with these advisors. It's just a free public service that they offer. And by the way, when you're over there at thoughtfulmoney.com, be sure to click the newsletter link at the top of the website to sign up for our free newsletter over there at Substack. Dr. Laffer, I can't thank you enough. This has just been fantastic as usual, and I wish you all the best in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody else, thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
watching.